Welcome back to TimeOut with the Sports Doctor podcast, where life, sports, and medicine intersect. We're very glad that you continue to support this podcast. You can get the information on any platform where podcasts are played, as well as getting the video content on YouTube. But if you want to just get one place to find all the content, go to my website at DrDerrick.com, and you will find everything on that website. So without further ado, let's get into this episode. All right, so welcome to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor, and we have a very special guest for you here today, Dr. Dawn Brown, who is a fellow Xavierite, who is a adult and child psychiatrist, and many other things. So I'm not even going to try to go through all the things she's doing right now, but we're going to talk about a lot of what she's doing. But I think the term that's used to summarize everything she's doing as a mental health multi-potentialite. And I don't know if she's reached her full potential yet, but she is doing a lot of things to positively impact not only athletes, but families and children and adults dealing in the mental health space. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Burgess. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I love what you're doing in the community.
Absolutely. So if I remember correctly, I think you are part of, is it 2001? Xavier class?
2000. Oh.
Okay. So I said, we literally have not spoken since 2000. So, but what is 23 years amongst friends? So glad to have you back on the show. And I'm really excited to hear about what you have going on.
Thanks again. And 20 years goes by so fast, or plus years, right?
It really does.
But yes. But we pick up where we just pick right back up where we stop. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's part of not only the Xavier experience, but it's the same way when I come into contact with my Howard classmates. We have so much in common. We know that once we get into the real world, so to speak, we don't have these same interactions that we had at Xavier and at Howard. So we all really cherish those moments that we had on campus. And it's easy to reconnect with people who have gone through the similar things that you have.
That's right. You're exactly right. And we're able to do things like this, right?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yes, to serve our community.
So outside of your medical practice, I know that you are an author. You're also a public motivational speaker. You're an advocate for ADHD patients. You work with the NFL, MLB, NBA, everyone. So you're doing a lot. But tell us kind of how you first got into this mental health space and why you're so passionate about your work.
Yeah, so it actually found me. I actually did my psychiatry rotation as a medical student, the very first rotation, because I want to rush through it and get to neurology. I want to be a neurosurgeon. I watched Dr. Alexa Kennedy, Keith Black, and Ben Carson when I was young on PBS specials. And that's all I talked about from the age of 6 all the way on upward. And so when I completed my psychiatry rotation, I thought, wow, this was amazing. I mean, patients trusted me easily. It was a completely different perception that I had about it prior to starting. And I just was able to help people in a space where they felt helpless. And that was very gratifying. But I learned so much about me in that process as well. And so that's what sparked my interest in psychiatry. Later on, I actually failed my boards 5 times during my medical school tenure. So that actually was very disheartening. It was my first major failures in education. And I just didn't know why that was happening, but I still wanted to be a doctor. And I still had faith that that was the mission that God had predestined for me. So I worked very hard. And if you fast forward, 7 years later, during my child fellowship, actually 2 months before I was graduating from child fellowship, one of my attendings, who's internationally recognized as an ADHD and autism expert, suggested that I get tested for ADHD. And so I tested moderate ADHD. Was mind-blowing because here I am, a psychiatrist, at the time I was serving as chief resident. So I'm toggling my and other schedules and doing a lot, not realizing that if you're busy and have ADHD, it helps us to be busy. So there were a lot of things that were masked. But, after treatment, I aced boards 4 years in a row. I was scored top 10%. And for me, I don't say that often, but it really made a difference between failing and really succeeding, right? And it was just very eye-opening that this is an executive function condition that I had been dealing with since I was born, really. And, my parents just really supported me through that process. Symptoms were masked, but here it came out full circle that this was a condition that I had, and I really wanted to help other people recognize it and receive treatment so they can live optimally. So that's why I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing, because I like to, on my podcast, talk about failures just as much as success,
Mhm.
because we know that they're linked together, right? But
Yes,
people
they
see you
are.
now, and even when I look at your profile, you're doing so many things, and you're working with some of the elite athletes, and you're working with, all different organizations, and people say, "Wow, Dr. Don can do that," but I'm just whoever. I'll never be able to reach that. But I feel when we share our failures as well as our success, we show that we're human. I had
That's right.
struggles with board exams later on in my
Mhm.
orthopedic residency or in my orthopedic training when we are trying to take our final boards. And I've been open about my failures and my struggles as well. But I appreciate you doing that, because many people want to just show what they do well and say, pat me on the back.
Mhm.
But when we can tell about our struggles, we make this seem like somebody else can really do it.
That's right. When you embrace that, I mean, I learn the best when I fail.
Yeah.
And so I embrace my failures. I try to understand from different perspectives why I failed, not necessarily hone in on, the actual reason or process of failing, but what I can learn from it. And that's what really motivated me to understand, okay, this is something that I have to overcome. And not till later, I realized that this was something that a lot of other individuals helped me overcome because I was in that state of failing period, right? And so you learn so much, you gain a lot during those
Yes.
periods. But yes, you do overcome them and you can overcome them. And so I truly believe in, what we call in church testifying, because you never know what other people are going through, and they may actually see themselves in your story. And
Yeah.
that's
So let's
important.
talk about this, since we're both, you know, speaking about the failures, especially with
Mhm.
testing. But I know personally, when I was struggling to pass the board exam, it became way more than a test. It became
Yeah.
almost like the one hurdle that I felt was defining me almost as a person. And it was so much time devoted to studying for this one test. It was almost
Yes.
like I could, every holiday I had linked to, okay, it's 4th of July, it's time to take the test. It's Christmas, it's New Year's, it's time to start studying for the test. Okay, I know that Memorial Day, there's a big review course that I need to go to. So it not only was it a test,
Yeah.
it was my life. And, I
Mhm.
really had to, as I kept going through it, and it seemed to be getting more and more daunting. And as you fell and the stakes get higher and higher, and it was like,
Mhm.
okay, this is only a test. I'm a
Yeah.
surgeon. I've gone through medical school. I've passed all these things. I know I'm capable.
Yes.
Then this is simply a
Yes.
test. And it was really in my mind being able to say, this is simply a test. This is not my life, even though
Mhm.
a lot's riding on this. This is not define who I am as a person. Did you have anything similar going through? I know that you were being diagnosed with ADHD at the time.
Most definitely. My mom actually was on her second treatment course for breast cancer. And, it wasn't going well at that time. At the same time, I was actually struggling. I say this, I was class president of my class because it was most humbling. I was more focused on that
Right.
than focused on failing, because I was very ashamed that, I can't graduate my class now
Yeah.
because, I failed step one twice, step two once, and then step three twice. And so, this is the last chance I have to, accomplish this goal of passing this test. Or if I still want to be a physician, I have to go outside the country, right?
Or
And
start
so
medical
there was
school again, right?
exactly, you're
Yeah.
exactly right. Exactly right. So I made the decision of taking 4 months off, doing a board prep program. I tried Kaplan, I tried Princeton Reviewed, and then this board prep program. So you're exactly right. It became my life. By the grace of God, I met so many individuals that were in similar situations that we still talk today.
Yeah.
And they're, OBGYNs, psychiatrists, neurologists. I mean, they've actually succeeded in what they intended to accomplish and what their dreams were. And so you're right. I mean, we are often tested in life. And, my test was to understand that at the time that I thought was a thorn in my side, it was really a blessing because it really, fueled my passion for now identifying and treating those who have this condition that I live with. And so when I see young kids say, Dr. Brown, you have ADHD, I'm like, yes. And they're like, you're a doctor? I'm like, yes, because all they hear is disability or dysfunction and you're disabled and, all the dis words, right? And so it's enlightening to see the smiles and, on their face and the pride on their faces. It's like, this is something we have in common and you can still do whatever you want to do. If you feel the doctor is something that's enlightening for you to do, you can do that, right? But I still made it and so can you. So I really melt when I see kids stand before me and ask those questions in surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
many people, and just answer this to my ignorance, but during our generation, I didn't know really a lot of people who had an ADHD diagnosis. And as you mentioned, you were diagnosed during medical school or later in training. And a lot of people are being
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed as adults now. Why are there so many children now being diagnosed, second, third grade versus when we were, is that simply education or now being more keen to the symptoms?
Yeah, several factors. We know more about the condition now than we did even 5 to 7 years ago. As an expert in the field, there's a lot of more research. I mean, ADHD is actually the number one mental health condition of the past 5 years that's more commonly studied than any other mental health condition. So, that says a lot, right? In considering the pandemic too. But we're identifying that these clinical symptoms are more apparent. We're trying to understand how they show up in different environments. We have more communication with schools and teachers in different states. Teachers are now able to recommend that, parents may, pursue evaluation, whereas before that was a big no-no. We're able to communicate with pediatricians and pediatricians invite. So it's a lot, right? It's a lot of relationships, a lot of communication, a lot of social media is really, really been expanding the mental health conversation as well. People are on mental health on social media, different platforms talking about mental health conditions, and people are seeing themselves in these stories. And so that's leading them to talk about it. But I will also say athletes, when Kevin Love and DeMar came out and we're talking about mental health. That really
Simone
fueled the
Biles.
spark. Yeah, Simone Biles, you're exactly right. Simone Biles, all these athletes on these different platforms, Michael Phelps, they were really advocating, for mental health. And so you could, that was huge. Because when you think about the heroes of our community when we're young and who we aspire to be in different avenues, sports is huge for a lot of these kids, right? And so having the conversation publicly as an athlete really, really sparked a lot of conversations that, with kids and their parents were talking about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we know the strength of an athlete's platform. I mean, they can go and reach people that we have a hard time even getting in front of. So
That's
for
right.
an athlete to be able to speak out about mental health and say, look, I'm
Mm-hmm.
struggling. Look at my body. I'm cut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the fastest, strongest I'll ever be,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm struggling mentally. That says a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm proud of the athletes that are really using their platforms to lead this charge.
I do. And I just have to get a shout out to Simone Biles and Michael Phelps, who both have ADHD, because again, this is one of the conditions that's commonly studied or most studied, like in Canada and Great Britain, more studies in those countries than in ours. But the stigma is so significant, yet we're trying to destigmatize it, and we're making headway. But I really, really want to give them a shout out because they didn't necessarily have to come out and really vocalize about their experience. And these are the greats, the goats, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's awesome to hear that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the pandemic. We know that the
Mm.
pandemic, we're still going to see long-term effects of the pandemic far
Yes.
greater than just COVID-19, which we're still dealing with now. But what are some of the different diagnoses or different symptoms that you've seen in children, teenagers, even adults dealing with the effects of the pandemic? Not only just the
Mm-hmm.
shutdown, but kind of getting back to life.
Mm-hmm. I think the number one symptom I've seen is anxieties and different forms of it. Ironically, social anxiety. for many individuals, it was more challenging to introduce themselves into the communities from which they came, right? And this is kind of a different avenue for all of us, because it's not like it was before for many individuals. So social anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorders, a lot of deaths that we experience
Oh,
that were connected with families, friends, colleagues, right? I mean, we can never forget the lives we lost, and God bless their souls, during this pandemic. Depression, very common. So substance use was extremely common. And, a lot of these were comorbidities. So if there's, depression, people would tend to drink more because they were inside, right? And we were social beings. And so, a lot of people weren't used to that. But there was people that were accustomed to that. And then when getting out of the pandemic, it was hard for them to re-socialize as well. In children, we saw a lot of regression and social skills, ironically. And so many children are just now catching back up to that. About a year and a half behind is the research, premature research, because we still have more research to do. But premature research is showing that the amount of regression, because school is like a social playground. Right. And so, it was very difficult for kids to do that. And we, a lot of us just lost time, right? We lost time. So, I think that this pandemic has affected us in so many different ways. But the great thing about this pandemic is that many people, again, are talking now about their mental health. And everyone has it. I really want to point that out, if you don't mind, Dr. Derrick, is that we all have mental health, and it's a difference between having mental illness. So mental health is like a spectrum. And we literally grade that spectrum as mild, moderate, severe symptoms. And then when you talk about mental illnesses, you're identifying clinical criteria of like depressive disorder, anxiety disorders, bipolar disorders, ADHD. Okay. So you can have mental illness, but good mental health. You can also have poor mental health, but a mental illness. So, we all have mental health. And I think we all should have access to mental health services for that very reason. So, I just want to put that out there just in case someone is at the brink of a barrier of wanting or deciding if they should seek help or not, knowing that, hey, you deserve it. You have mental health. You're on the spectrum, just like I am, just like Dr. Derrick is. So please, 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 if that is, the tool that gets you there, we want you there because it's important. It's important.
And thank you for that point of clarity of mental health and mental illness being, it's a spectrum, as you mentioned. So people feel, I think, ashamed many times when you have a diagnosis. But as you mentioned, we all do. Either you're diagnosed or you're undiagnosed, but we all are dealing with something. And many times you don't know why you're functioning like you are until you sit down with someone who can really listen to your symptoms and put it all together. So if you're enjoying this episode, don't wait to the end to share it. Share it now. Share this with a friend or a colleague that you think might find value in this information. And then also make sure that you click and leave us a 5-star review and give us feedback, because we really value your feedback and your input. Now back to the episode.
Yes. That's true, because that's why I don't use the word normal, because for so many people, that's kind of their sense of normalcy until they realize there's something different, that's a healthier way of approaching things or of living, right? So what's natural, right? And so I think that's a very good point that you made there. You're exactly right.
And then talking about providers, access to care. You mentioned access. Talk about how your practice is very unique. And you're able to get your hands on clients, patients, athletes in many different states. So talk to us about that.
Yes, I actually explored the realm of telepsychiatry, and I've been in the field since 2014. And it was interesting because there was a couple of companies, because I'm a contract physician too for other companies. So I was told that I was at one point the only child psychiatrist in Houston that actually provided tele services, right? Wow. I mean, I was trying to really get my colleagues on board because I knew that was one platform that could really hit home and touch a lot of people, even in our own state that didn't have access to a psychiatrist like myself, or therapy, or, and it's not necessarily just the access, but, just the convenience factor. So, I see people in their cars and office closets, you name it, wherever they're comfortable. And also destigmatize the experience. This screen does something that allows people to open up for many people, to talk about, what's going on. And then, so my practice, ADHD Wellness Center, and also my other practice, mental health athletics, they're both telepsychiatry and telehealth practices. We're in 6 states, licensed in 6 states, and we provide mental health services for children, adults, and also athletes. Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
And talk about
Yeah.
some of the,
Yeah.
are these contracts that you have with some of the professional sporting leagues, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I thought it was very important that I was an independent contractor with professional organizations, just because I knew that at the time, many of the athletes were just starting to talk about mental health outwardly and openly. And there was a lot of not really trusting kind of the system, or trusting, or who to trust, and who do I go to, and who do I speak with, and do I talk to my team? And this is going to affect my play, time. So, I thought that if I could take that element out of that for them, so that I can really talk to them as a human being first, and let's forget athlete way down the line, but let's talk to you as a human being, because that's who you are first. Then let's do that. And so it was very important to me that I was an independent clinician, and that's what I do. So I do independent work. I'm referred by these organizations, professional sports organizations, and athletes have autonomy to choose who they want, with serial interviews. But basically, that's how I engage with some of my athletes. But my first athlete came to me when I was in practice, one of the former Houston Rockets player, and he was dealing with anxiety. He came with his wife to talk, because guess what? Kevin Love was talking about his symptoms of panic disorder. So that's what led him, to see someone locally, and he chose me. So that's how I really got into the sports psychiatry field, where travel, and I started to realize many of these athletes were dealing with a lot, and they actually have a higher risk than the normal population of dealing with mental health illnesses than any other population. So it was somewhere I could feel that I could provide value to this community and their ecosystems. Mm-hmm.
And I like the correlation between athletes, especially high-level athletes, and professionals of all sorts, doctors, lawyers, teachers,
Yeah.
whoever. When you're under a lot of pressure to perform, it's very
Mm-hmm.
similar. Performance anxiety, or just the pressure to perform, can cripple a lot of people or paralyze a lot of people. So when you're dealing with athletes, talk to us about that bridge between mental health and performance, and how they're so closely related.
It's interesting, because a lot of them have been dealing with mental illnesses or issues from the very beginning, that they were prepped to become athletes. Many of the athletes I worked with, or I work with, were scouted at like 3rd grade.
Yes.
Many athletes have sister siblings that are all athletes. So they were being scouted. Literally, I was like 3rd grade, like
Yeah.
3rd grade. Right. And so this trajectory of being, on this spectrum. So you have like this enclosed circle of individuals that really try to enclose in on you, right? And so they'll provide, some of the resources that you need in order to kind of get you on this journey of, becoming this professional athlete, which many of them dream to become. And so many of them had been dealing with their mental health conditions in a healthy ways. They condition, they work out. This is what we teach our patients, right? Is, healthy eating and exercise management and all these type of things. So they do these things on a routine basis. But the downside to this is now they're masking some of these symptoms that they didn't realize they had, because they're routinely, using natural treatments or managements to handle stress and performance. And they do them all over again, over and over and over and over again, right? So what does that do to the mental health mindset of an athlete when he's injured, for example, and he can't perform to the expectation that he's so used to performing? What does he do? Or what do a lot of these athletes do when the pandemic came? I had athletes who were getting to know their families again, because they often traveled on the road. And, that was a different type of experience for them as well. A lot of us laymen look at these athletes, and, we look at the prestige that and the position that this brings. But many of these individuals are struggling. They're just like you and I. So human nature, but they're also on a platform where everyone sees their struggles.
Right.
So that's a lot of pressure, not just because of their sport, but because now it's publicized. So yeah, there's different levels to this, but relating mental health has been amazing, because it really just allowed an open door for the athletes to now kind of like take off these heavy coats, right? And really just lay down their guards and really talk about what they've been dealing with and not feel judged, not feel, like they're the center of attention, because we actually have ongoing conversations and there are more people in the room that may have similar conversations. So again, they're seeing themselves and they realize that some of their co-players are, dealing with some of the similar stuff that they're dealing with. So that
Right.
helps with the health and healing too. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
So
I agree.
it's been a great journey for many of them. Hmm.
And I'm putting your, if you're watching on YouTube, your website back on the bottom of the screen because it is a great resource for athletes, for everyone to go. You have a lot of great information on there. As I was going through your website, I was looking at some of the common questions or things, statements that you would hear from athletes. People only look at me like I'm a bag of money, or, you know, what happens after an injury? Who am I after an injury? Who am I after retirement? Things of that nature. And
Hmm.
one that I really jumped out to me was, and this is something that you hear all the time. Oh, you're having a bad day, take it out on the field. Channel all this energy and release it on your opponent and rip their heads off. And
Right.
then after the game, hang your helmet up, get in your car, and go back and be a normal person in society. And we know that's not how it happens. So this
It's
kind of
not.
speak to the expectations that are placed on athletes and how that can
Mhm.
be a burden, so to speak.
It is right, exactly, and I'm glad you brought that up, Derek, because it allowed me to also look at the ecosystems of the athlete and also see if I am able to provide education and awareness of the verbiage they're using to describe, what they want their players to do without, respecting their role, but just giving some insight that taken out on the field may not necessarily be the right way to say it. Let's use some and choose some other words, because I mean that's why some of the athletes were fighting in the NFL. I'm like, why are you? This not boxing, But and I make light of the situation, but many of these athletes were taking it out on their competitors, and maybe committing fouls or doing some illegal contact or fighting, and because they just weren't dealing with all the issues off the court or off the field. And so it was important for me to discuss that with their coaches, their athletic team, their, some of the physicians on the team, and their families. And so that's why, mental athletics is also in the business of helping athletes, but also their ecosystem. So we provide, educational seminars and even management for their families, because we also realize mental health may run through families genetically, but we also provide, we also feel it's an inlet or outlet for them to be able to talk about it and then understand what that athlete needs are. And that's important, other than what they feel their needs are outside of mental health. So it's been very eye-opening and a positive experience for many of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you for that. And, just thank you for the work that you're doing because we know that there's a shortage for sure of not
Yeah.
only psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, all of the above, people dealing with the mental health space. I truly, when I started this podcast, didn't see it as a media for mental health. Now I'm probably 5, 6, 8, 10 episodes in about
I
mental health.
saw that.
And there's
You've
some of
had
them.
some awesome people on this platform,
I
Dr.
appreciate
Derrick.
it. I
I've heard,
appreciate it.
yes,
And
yes.
it's really, this platform has allowed me to connect with people like yourself, connect with people, I already knew you, but connect with people all over the world about
Mhm.
different subjects. And it's really, I'm just trying to bring positivity, trying to show people what's possible, and really trying to uplift, the community through this podcast.
Well, you're doing it. You're definitely
Thank you.
doing it. And please continue. People are listening, and they're actually you're leading people to places where they need to be in order to succeed in their careers, but also for their own mental health wellness and medical wellness, right? Because they are connected. And
Yes.
so you're opening many doors to having conversations about how they connect, has opened athletes' mindsets and their hearts and their mouths to, communicate what's going on. And so I really, really am grateful of being on the platform with you today, and just I admire what you're doing, and I'm here to assist you in any way possible because I love your mission. So thank you so much for
Well,
doing what
thank
you're
you.
doing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So on Time Out with the Sports Doctor, this is your final timeout. So
Mhm.
you've been very open about some of your struggles, about your diagnosis with ADHD, and about a lot of the things that you've done. And your hands are in so many different pots, and we can see your passion. But speak to someone who might feel, okay, Dr. Don can do it, but I can't do it. So speak to how just following your passion and keeping your eye on the prize, and, continue to push forward despite obstacles, how you can still achieve your dreams, your goals.
One thing that I recommend that you do is you have to find what motivates you. We're motivated by so many different things, and that motivation doesn't die. It may actually dim along the path, but it's always there. So it may be in the form of an instinct, it may be in the form of a board that you created that shows everything you want to do in life. It may be, in a conversation that you have with someone else. Whatever that sparks your motivation, your drive, find it, rekindle it, and keep going. For me, it was affirmations that really helped me. I wake up every day and I speak things as though they were. And that
Yes.
really starts my day off as, being a positive mindset, because I know that in the day, I'm not going to conquer everything great. And I don't see people that are necessarily healthy, right? And so it's important that I bring that to them. I bring hope to them. I bring a smile on my face so that, in the midst of their dilemma, that they can see that, hey, I can have hope for you, and let's work through this together. And so I really feel that we're used as instruments and vehicles to be able to do that. But it's also important for us to have that self-care. And so we have to make sure that we pour into ourselves too. So affirmations, prayer. I mean, I'm a huge believer in prayer and reading the word. I'm a Christian, and that's really, really got me to where I am, because I understand who I am, but I understand whose I am. And I
Absolutely.
understand that the mission is bigger than me. And
Yeah.
so connecting with people like you, this is how we, fulfill the mission that has been destined for us, right? We can't do it
I agree.
alone. And so that's my final message, is you never can do it alone. There are people that, seek out people that are people where you want to be, people that are going to encourage you, not going to put you down, people that are going to lift you up when you're not necessarily going the path that you thought you would go. That's so important. But also lean on other people in times when you need them. But also understand that you need to kind of commune with others, because you can't do it alone. Can't do this life alone. That's not how we were created. We were
Yeah.
created to work with other people. So
Yeah. Community.
yeah,
We
you
need to
can do
find, yeah,
it.
find your community. It might not be
I
your
agree.
family, but find your community of
That's
people
right.
who believe in you and are going to
That's
support your
right.
mission.
That's right. Exactly. Because they become your family. So we're
You're
gonna
right.
redefine what family is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you
Yeah.
mentioned
Love
affirmations.
that.
What are your top one or two affirmations?
Oh man, so some of my affirmations are scripture related.
Mm.
So one of my favorite scriptures, Jeremiah 29 verse 11, is basically just a affirmation of hope that God would never, fail you. He will always give you the spirit of hope and not fear to make you succeed, because he understands and already knows what he's predestined for you. So, I take those scriptures and create my own verbiage, as you can see there,
Yeah.
about how that's going to be applicable to my day. So if I have a big presentation that I may be nervous about that day, I speak to the fear and I accept that I am feeling a little anxiety, but the Lord did not give me that spirit, to succeed in, meeting the mission of speaking to my audience. No, it just reminds me that I'm human and I need to rely on him to get me through this. And so I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that that's done. That I'm going to bless someone today. That's always one of my affirmations as well. And how can I do that? Right. And so, that can be different in different ways. Right. And then also, I also pour into myself, that, after my work day, I'm going to take, an hour just to probably turn down the phone and relax and meditate and just be in my own mindset and just kind of what I call, come down from my day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, because, having ADHD, my mind is always on. It's always on. It's always going. So, sometimes it's difficult to separate, when you're not working, when you are working, and when you work for someone else, or you're doing other things. And we just got to quiet the moment. And I love those quiet moments. I cherish them. I look forward to them. They refuel me, and they just allow me to be in the moment and be still, if you will. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank
some
you
of the
for
things I
sharing
do
that.
meditation too.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
definitely.
tell people, I know that
Yes.
you have your website, but also social
hmm
media, how they can follow the work you're doing.
Yeah, so you can actually follow me on Mental Health Athletics, is basically the social media website. But I also have my speakers platform, which is Dr. Dawn Psych MD. That's DRDAWN, P as in Paul, SYCHMD. That is my main platform. And that platform would take you to ADHD Wellness Center, which is one of my practices, and Mental Health Athletics, which is another practice that I have. So yes, please feel free. And I look forward to your messages, your comments, your questions, your statements. I'm a huge advocate for people, and I love to see, I love to help people in any way that I can. And so, I look forward to, hearing from people in the DMs, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah. Well, thank
Yeah.
you very much for your time. Thank you for your powerful message. And
Yes.
if any way I can help amplify your message, please let me know.
You are. So thank you, Dr. Derrick. And it's an honor to be here. And I, wish you all the best and continue the great work that you're doing. God
All
bless
right.
you
Thank you
and
very
your
much.
mission. Thank you.
Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episodes. Until later, peace.
Hey, time out with the sports doctor. Keep our head right in the game. We ain't never stopping. You are now tuned in. Trust you don't want to miss. This is where life, sports, and medicine.